we meet in an hour of change and challenge, in a decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance. If this capsule history of our progress teaches us anything, it is that man in his quest for knowledge and progress is determined and cannot be deterred. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
Hello, everybody. I'm Adam Zuckerman, your host for the Energy Impact Podcast. In this episode, we're speaking with Karol Gobczynski. He's head of climate and energy at Ingka Group, which you may be more familiar with as Ikea in a certain special way we'll talk about. And we're here to talk about how the Ingka Group and Ikea are doing its part to help us secure a renewable future. But Karol is a lot more than just that. He's been a steering committee member for Resource Platform. He's been on the Net Zero Expert Advisory Group member. He's on the RE100 Advisory Committee. Karol, it's fantastic to see you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Yeah, of course. Where are you joining us today from?
So I'm joining from Malmö, city of Malmö, South Sweden. Very sustainable and pleasant to live when you would like to cut your personal climate footprint.
Okay. Well, when I end up flying to Sweden next, I will certainly offset the carbon from the flight. Perhaps I'll take a boat with sailing or maybe even row. We'll find out. But I think you're 100% that when you travel to Sweden, you should be sustainable. Sweden is known for its sustainability. And there's a line that I'd like to read to you from your website. Let's start off here. It says that the world around us is changing and quickly. As more people move into big cities, our living spaces are getting smaller. The climate crisis is beginning to affect us all. The planet's limited resources mean unsustainable consumption must be addressed. At the same time, digitalization and new technology are changing many things for the better. All this means both new challenges and new opportunities. It means we've got a real chance to make a positive impact on society and our planet. Now, that's exactly what you're focused on. I don't think that we can talk about it better. Karol, can you tell us a little bit about what the Ingka Group is, just so listeners that might not be familiar can have a good foundation to start from?
Yeah, so Ingka Group is one of the companies working under Ikea brand. So we own Ikea retail in 32 markets, and it represents around 90% of Ikea sales around the world. And Ingka Group was created by Ingvar Kamprad, so the founder of Ikea, and it has three arms: Ikea Retail, which is the biggest part of the business, Inga Investments, which is managing the profit of the company, and Inga Centers, so very often the meeting places connected to our stores.
Okay, and when we think about Ikea, this is not a small mom and pop shop anymore. It's 170,000 coworkers around the world. It's more than $37 billion in retail sales annually. What is your responsibility in terms of overseeing the company's strategy, and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I think first of all, as a global business, as you mentioned, we have big responsibility. We have big impact and big responsibility. And I started my journey within Ikea in the supply chain. So almost 10 years ago, I worked as energy developer in Central Europe just after my studies in renewable energy science. And I've been working with around 120 Ikea suppliers to integrate the energy and climate agenda into suppliers development program. So it included how we report the emissions and how we integrate the energy efficiency measures and show the benefits of working towards the climate and energy goals. And after a couple of years working within the supply chain, then I moved to Ikea Poland as a climate and energy manager, and where I was working with the investments team, with acquisition of the wind farms, working on the home solar offer for the customers, which is a really great project, especially in Poland, when still a big part of electricity is coming from coal. to enable as well individuals to act and put the PV panels on the rooftops. And for last 5 years, I've been working on the group level within Inga, leading the climate and energy agenda, and co-leading the climate positive as a shared strategic initiative across Ikea. And yeah, the first part was a strategy update and defining where we are going, setting first science-based targets to say that we need to reduce emissions in absolute terms. So we need to decouple the growth from the emissions and how we are going to do that. And of course, the renewable energy, electrification and efficiency is a big part of it, as well as becoming circular business model and using materials, renewable and recycled materials with lower climate footprint.
It's interesting and a lot to unpack there. Let's start off with your first step in your career, if you could, that you mentioned. You were working with suppliers to evaluate and help them become more sustainable. How does that work? Is Ikea in your business practices truly looking at the supplier level, not only your immediate scope 1 emissions?
Yeah, so Ikea looks, and Ingka Group looks on the emissions across the value chain. So we calculate the emissions coming from supply chain, but as well from the downstream emissions, so connected to product use at home. For example, one of the impacts which we are measuring under climate footprint is connected the energy used to power LED bulbs, which we are selling. And what we can see now, for example, so we started to sell only LED a couple of years ago already. And since we set science-based targets, actually the energy efficiency of LED bulbs, which we are offering, as well improved drastically, which is helping to reduce the footprint and helping the customers to save energy at home and their footprint as well. And it shows that it's good to be a good business because it creates new opportunities in a way. And then, of course, the work with the supply chain where I started, and then it was very much about audit. The program was called Suppliers Go Renewable, and it was about auditing the suppliers, as well checking the energy performance. And when I started my journey, I thought, oh, I will just go to the factories, share the solutions, share what is available already. And then when I went to these factories, I very quickly discovered that there are many knowledgeable people from whom I can learn. And my role is how to build the bridge between the knowledgeable people who are on site with the business agenda. And that's what at the end ended up to be one of the important factors for my future development as well, to see that people are a very important part of the equation.
What was one of the key takeaways that you learned that some people listening may find a little bit surprising or important?
Yeah, I think before starting my journey at Ikea, actually, I didn't know about all the work on climate and energy. So I was even surprised on finding this information 10 years ago, because Ikea was as well, and Inga was not communicating a lot of the activities which were happening. And during last years, the amount of materials and what we communicate increased. So I think that's an interesting fact when I joined, actually, that to discover this universe and how the sustainability agenda is embedded within the different parts of the organization.
Understood. Now, Ikea has identified, I believe, 3 major challenges that are impacting the business. The first is climate change, which is clearly what we're here talking about today. The second is unsustainable consumption, and the third is inequality. Focusing on the climate change, one thing that I think is pretty interesting that you said in your second step when you were in Poland was that you were helping consumers with solar. Most people, they go to Ikea and they see the sprawling parking lots that have solar on top of them now, which is fantastic. You may imagine that there are solar panels on top of the buildings, which we all know have very large footprints. But are you saying that you're also helping consumers purchase solar as well?
Yes, indeed. And because we are so close to people's homes, and as Ingka Group, we own and operate 547 turbines within different countries. We own the PV panels installations, and we are investing in renewable energy to enable the renewable energy consumption across our value chain as well, as much as possible. And then we said, like, what if we will take these learnings that we have and apply them to enable customers. And so already today within the 11 markets, we are offering the home solar services in the partnership to make it the access to renewable energy much more convenient and easier, because this is as well could be very complex purchase process, and that's where we see the opportunity how we can simplify and make it for the many. And one of the key factors, for example, in Poland, when we've been working on the offer, it was to connect with financing, because to enable people to save the money from the day one as well through enabling long-term financing of the home solar.
And for that, just to clarify, and I can't imagine this is the case, you're not sending them a kit of solar panels that they install and construct and manufacture on their own, like a traditional desk or bed. This is a fuller package, I imagine, yeah?
Yeah, it is a service. So yeah, it includes all the components.
Okay. Well, if you ever need someone to test the home user that might have to assemble on their own, you call me up, we'll figure it out.
Good.
Okay. So the scale of Ikea, I think, is one of the most impressive things about the company. And I don't believe that many people truly appreciate the scale of energy consumption and the impact that corporations the size of Ikea have, and positive impact as well. Can you help shed some light on how much energy the company consumes, what you think the growth is? Have you actually gone to net zero? Like, where does the company stand in its sustainability journey?
Yeah, I think first of all, it starts with the commitment. And I think today, and you mentioned before that I've been part of within the expert advisor group for creating the criteria for net zero standard, because it's really important that we have a clear criteria or how companies should set the net zero goal and which emissions should be included, and that all the emissions, including scope 1, 2, and 3, are covered by the net zero goals by the companies. So, and this is a big enabler to create the trust as well within the company's action. So it starts with the goals, setting science-based goals, and currently aligning the goals with this new net zero standard, which was published in October just last year. And many of the companies, including us, we are working to align our goals with the net zero standard currently. And that's first part. Then the second part is be transparent on your emissions. It's so important on annual basis to show the emissions across the value chain and show what is the business growth versus the emissions reduction or increase, because there could be go different way, but hopefully they are going down. And that's what we are happy to share, that we are decoupling the growth from the emissions. So from Ingka Group, from the value chain, we decreased emissions across the value chain by 6.5% since 2016, while growing the business at the same time. Then that's second element. And third, I think, which is the crucial one, is the action. And it is how you are securing the reduction of emissions. And for us, it's as well, one part is about investing. It's investing in, like, we are investing in renewable energy generation from Inka's side. And we already invested more than 2.5 billion euro. We just announced new investments in 9 solar farms in Spain and Germany. And then we are committed to invest 6.5 billion total by 2030. So I think the putting money, I think it's really important part of the transition, and companies need to prove that they are taking the actions on that side.
And
then,
for those investments, is that taking an equity stake in these solar farms or wind farms or other, or is it simply agreeing and committing to a power purchase agreement, perhaps over a long time span?
Yeah, so we own and operate the solar and the wind farms, and as Ingka Group, and we in majority of the projects we have 100% share, but there are projects when we have partially shares of the projects.
Mm-hmm. And then are you wheeling the electricity back over the grid, or are you oftentimes trying to find on premises or close to location for the siting?
So first of all, when it comes to securing the renewable electricity consumption, first our priority is to optimize on-site generation. So we are as well investing a lot in on-site generation, as well as electrification of heating using the heat pumps. Second priority is to invest off-site in renewable electricity generation. And here we are using the renewable electricity attributes to secure that the same amount of renewable electricity that we generated was consumed by us. Because as we know, if electrons are landing in the grid, then you cannot distinguish which is green, which is black. But correctly working the systems like in Europe of quarantines of origin can enable this traceability and avoid the double counting. And the third element, if it's not possible for us to secure own investments, then we are purchasing the renewable electricity from the other companies.
What part of the company consumes the most electricity and power? Is it the operation of the stores? I imagine not. Is it production? Are you producing the majority of your items that you're selling, or are they acquired by suppliers?
So when we talk about the full value chain, the energy, it's one of the major source of the emissions across the value chain in different forms. Because if you produce materials, you're using energy. If you are producing the products, you are using as well energy. When, as you mentioned, within our stores, we are using energy, but as well, the products which we are selling are using the electricity, for example, like lighting or appliances range. So the big part is connected to materials production and product use at home. That's the biggest parts, the biggest groups of the emissions with the energy. And that's why it was so important from the Ikea perspective to commit that across the value chain, we will work towards securing renewable energy use.
So if you're becoming an owner operator of a solar farm, let's say, are then you selling that electricity to your suppliers to ensure that the value that is accrued from that clean energy matriculates up into your products themselves? Or is there something else that's going on?
Yeah. So from Ingka Group, we are selling some of the electricity already to the suppliers. And additionally, the Ikea Group that is responsible for the supply chain management, they have as well special program to enable the renewable electricity consumption for the suppliers. So that's the first steps that we are taking to enable the consumption of renewable electricity.
Okay. Now, you've been involved in several other alliances of clean energy stakeholders. You mentioned a few at the beginning of the podcast, RE100, for example. Can you tell us about how those groups are playing a role and whether those roles that they are playing are actually influencing and help shaping how companies are procuring clean energy and setting their objectives?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's so important to send the demand signal from the companies that we are here and we want to consume the renewable electricity and we want to take active role in creating the renewable energy market and society. And that's why it is important to come together and send this signal and bring as many companies as possible to send this signal, then align as well on the advocacy part and what kind of policy measures can unlock the potential of renewable electricity consumption, for example, and interaction as well with the companies on the generation side for the companies that are not directly investing in renewable electricity generation to create these collaborations, like you mentioned, like power purchase agreements, for example, between the companies to finance the development of new projects.
What does an organization like RE100 actually do? So if you're representing in a capacity as a company employee and you go to RE100, what are the benefits that you get out of a relationship from a group such as that?
One of the topics is one of the added value is that it's a platform for sharing as well what we do, as well as learning from the others. So it unleashes the potential of collaboration and innovation, and that more wider amount of companies are implementing the impactful way of sourcing the renewable electricity, for example. The other part is connected to advocacy as well, and being very clear and sending the signals as well. What are the barriers to enable further development of renewable energy? Like, for example, removing the fossil fuel subsidies, making the permitting of renewable energy easier, and creating easier access to the grid for renewable energy generators, because these we now can unlock the potential and we can see much more renewable energy within the grid.
When do you think that IKEA will be able to go full net zero and have no black energy or dirty energy in its scope 1, scope 2, or scope 3?
Scope 3. Yeah, so we are committed to halve the emissions by 2030, and we are committed to reach net zero latest 2050. And when it comes to scope 1 and 2, of course, it's much more easier and direct influence, but as well, some of the parts of scope 3 are easier to influence. But there are the parts when we need to collaborate within this, and it's much more systemic change, which is amazing, because we can take it as a challenge, but as well opportunity. And bringing here the example, for example, on the customer travel, part of our footprint is connected to the people traveling to our stores, and what are the emissions connected to that one. So to reduce it, we are investing in putting the EV chargers on our premises. So for example, we did just big investment in Sweden around installing quite many chargers, which will increase the amount of EV chargers on the available in Sweden more than 10%. I think it's around 15, 17%, because these numbers are changing very quickly as well. And that's the part when we do our part and the customers do their part. And as well, but as well, we need to go step ahead always to be much more convenient. And for example, offer the zero emission deliveries. And we started just a couple of years ago with almost close to zero share of zero emission deliveries, because availability of the electric trucks was not very, very limited. Currently, we have 11% on the global level, which is pretty exciting to see the movement.
What are some of the other exciting initiatives that your company is pursuing? Recycling, recycling, upcycling, what else?
Yeah, I think the most exciting, personally, what I see, it's embedding the climate actions within the different jobs across the organization, because we know that if we want to succeed with the transition to net zero society, we need to connect the climate action with everyday life at home, but as well at work, and how we enable coworkers to take the climate action as everyday job. And this is connected to sometimes boring things for that we are not talking about, but very important, like putting the CO2 measures and integrating the CO2 goals across the business, which are measured in the same way as the financial measures. And then it is about increasing the competence, which is exciting. And we talk about a lot about just transition. And I think each company has a role to play, and how to bring the new skills and new knowledge across organization. And going to the parts which I think usually people like to write about, and here it's of course the renewable energy is one part, but there is as well circular. So there was a big assessment done of all IKEA products based on circular principles to develop the roadmaps and make all the products much more circular. We are piloting many different circular services and capabilities across all the markets, because we know that to become fully circular, it's about materials and where from these materials are coming, increasing the recycled content. It is about design of the products, but it is as well how we meet customers in a different way. And yeah, I think these are one of the most exciting parts that are happening.
Many companies view that after they sell a product to a consumer, it's no longer their responsibility. And it is refreshing to hear that you are truly taking a full 360 approach on those products. Have conversations gone as far to say that we would potentially offer discounts to people that have clean energy generation at their own homes for products that are using electricity, to encourage and incentivize people to truly have that after sale positive impact?
Yeah, I think I'm not fully able to answer on this question, but I think it's what the direction that you are pointing is definitely something what we'll see more and more when it comes to how we engage with customers in a new way. Because we know that meeting customers in a circular way, for example, it's not one linear buy and see you relationship, but it's much more engagement relationship as well. It's about offering spare parts to the products. It is about securing that products are maintained in the right way. So it's as well providing the right information towards the customer. And we know that the education is one of the best sources of marketing as well. And I think that's that's what we will see more and more.
Where do you see the transition broadly going over the next 10 to 20 years? What do you think the company will accomplish that may surprise people that you are exceptionally excited about?
Yeah, it's really interesting because when we look forward, I always look backward as well. I'm coming from the East Poland, growing up in the 90s with thin wallet, and like many families had at that time. We didn't know word sustainability, or was not so commonly used, but people were living in sustainable way because of the affordability. And it was about planting your own vegetables, doing your own pickles, but as well saving energy, biking much more, which was as well lowering down the cost. And it's not only about sacrifices and having sad life, it is actually about how we take it to the different level. And I very often look at my parents. So my dad is electrician, and I thought working with energy is the most boring thing, but it's changed in the meantime. And now he's employing people, and they are putting PV panels on people's roofs, and their even sauna, it's covered with the PV panels today. And the next part is buying electric vehicle. And they are doing that because of the affordability and knowing that this will bring the cost reduction as well. So going into the future, I think we will see more and more the benefits, not only from the environmental perspective, but as well from cost perspective, coming from renewables, clean energy services, plant-based diet, circular living. This already is making life more affordable and lowering down the cost, and it needs to be just more convenient, I think, to scale up.
That makes sense. Now, for the long-term viewpoint, we're truly moving in, and I believe that you're going to hit your targets to get away from all dirty energy. You're clearly using solar. I understand you're using wind. Do you have hydro in your portfolio or geothermal?
No, we don't have hydro and geothermal. The only ground sourced heating we have when it comes to ground source heat pumps. So I think going forward, definitely the electrification of heating and transportation will play a big role. And as well as understanding more on detailed level, what is the energy consumption, and to be able to balance your generation consumption on a more frequent basis. Because today we know that majority of the purchase of renewable energy is about balancing the loads on the annual basis, how much is generated and consumed. But we will go much more on the granular level on balancing, and there will be many new opportunities, and there are many new opportunities for the companies and the individuals as well.
With that intermittency of renewables, oftentimes you have to compare some of the base load that might be available from dirty energy or otherwise to renewable plus battery storage. What's your take on nuclear power? There's a taxonomy shift that might be coming in the EU. Is that something that you're watching?
Yeah, we are committed to use renewable energy, and that's where we big believers in wind, solar, and storage technologies. And looking on the costs of energy and how much the cost of solar and wind decreased, we see 85% reduction of the cost of generating electricity through solar during 10 years. It's just unbelievable. And I remember during my studies of renewable, when I studied the renewable energy science, when the price was much higher, it sounded impossible to reach this level. And here we are, and we see that the prices will go even lower. So I think solar and winds have such a big price competitiveness, and with storage catching up, and hydrogen interest. And there is a big question mark if we need any more very expensive sources of electricity.
Okay, fair enough. The last question I have for you, unless there are a few topics that you'd like to hop into, and I'm certainly open to suggestions, is you have a unique perspective in that you are invited to speak around the world. What are some of the questions that people don't bring up that you believe should be talked more about?
Yeah. I think we should talk more about enablers of the transition. I think we very often jump quickly into the solution because this is very something tangible, like, for example, PV panel or wind turbine. But to secure the transition, we need to think from the perspective how we can enable the many people to take climate action. And as a customers from the company's perspective, but as well co-workers. And I think this is what we need to talk much more about, how we are embedding the climate measures, but as well other sustainability areas measures like social impact, water use and so on, within the scope of performing our work and in our lives as well. So I believe this needs much more discussion and much more transparency.
What are some steps that you believe could be taken to increase that level of transparency and to get more individuals and more companies and more countries involved in that dialogue?
I think we need to move the focus from technology back to people in a way, and see what does it mean, this transition for people, and what are the challenges and opportunities that we have, because these can make it much more relevant as well for people who are thinking in shorter term and longer term to see the benefits of this transition.
How many countries is IKEA operating in right now?
So as Ingka Group, we are operating in 32 markets. When it comes to supply chain, there are more markets, and there are as well other franchisees who are operating in a couple of new markets. So yeah, it will be around 50 markets that we are operating.
So let's baseload 30 plus. Do you find that there are differences in acceptance and in interest in the various markets that you're operating in? And if so, what is best and what could be improved just a little bit more?
Yeah, so I think that maybe interesting angle here is the understanding people perception on the climate. And as Inga, we are doing the climate action research. We've done this for the third time. We are doing every second year. To understand what is people's attitude towards climate action, where we see that almost all people want to act and take actions when it comes to climate, but there are as well barriers and hurdles, and these barriers and hurdles are different within the different markets. So within some of the markets, it could be barriers connected to legislation or the infrastructure available. We know that within some of the countries, the biking infrastructure is much more available than the others. Even between the cities, we see big differences. It is about affordability and convenience. And these are the important pieces, I think, which are coming across all the markets. And then it is about enablers again, what are the expectations from the customers that companies, what companies should do, and the governments. And very often it is coming to make it easier and more convenient, and clearly communicating the benefits so people can choose the right products, for example.
All right. Well, Karol, it has been fascinating speaking with you. Thank you for sharing your journey with us to how you became the head of climate and energy at Ingka Group. I think it is fantastic that you and your colleagues and truly the entire company are doing their part to help us secure a renewable future, not only in the economy where you're located, but also far beyond, because the products have a much larger lifespan. Karol, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Our leadership in science and industry, our hopes for peace and security, our obligations to ourselves as well as others, all require us to make this effort, to solve these mysteries, to solve them for the good of all men and for the progress of all people.